Here's another thing we were lied to about is whether or not the COVID vaccine alters menstruation. Women were kind of called hysterical about this.
You were crazy.
We were patted on the head and told to run along. Women continued to say that something was off after they received their vaccine with their menstruation. And we were told, it's all right. It'll work itself out. In fact, we got, we're going to play this later from Dr. Fauci, like, literally, he shrugged his shoulders like we need to study that more, which is interesting, right? Because these kind of things, you would think you would study this holistically when you release a vaccine on an entire population of humans. But now a new study published in the British Journal of Medicine does confirm that the COVID vaccine can alter menstruation. So the women who claimed this, myself included, were telling the truth. Now, recall that women who were said this were either not taken seriously,
right,
or silenced. Women who were in their active fertile years, I'm going to call them their baby-making years, were punished for not wanting to take the risk. I remind you of Allison Williams from ESPN. She lost her job because she wanted to have a baby. She had one baby and was like, this is when I want to give my child a sibling. We are actively trying for a baby. I can't do anything that would sabotage my fertility, and I don't want to take the risk. And, well, we'll let her tell you what happened to her.
So I know I've been a bit mum since releasing the statement I put out a few months ago now regarding my decision to not receive the COVID-19 vaccine. I just want to give everybody an update on my situation with ESPN. And a great producer once told me, don't bury the lead. So I have been denied my request for accommodation by ESPN and the Walt Disney Company. And effective next week, I will be separated from the company. First of all, thank you, everyone who reached out and texted, emailed, called.
Okay, so we can stop her here. So what she's saying is, I have to put my family first. I cannot take a risk. Now, if you want to have a baby, you need reliable menstruation cycle. I mean, many women have unpredictable cycles and get pregnant. But for the most part, we can all agree that a 28-day normal, healthy cycle is desirable. Everyone kind of wants that, right? We can all agree on that. Right. So credit to the UK government that decided to study women's claims about the vaccine altering their periods. And they announced in 2021 they would do it. And just this week, they announced the results. The study shows that women were right. The vaccine does cause a change in their periods. What it says, though, is that the study says that the vaccine can cause a delay of periods by an average of 1 day. So is 1 day a big deal? Well, it is if you're trying to conceive or prevent contraception. Also, this is an average, right? So then many women maybe experienced more than 1 day. Not maybe, they did. And many would experience earlier periods or -1.
Can I say this? So before you joined us here on the show, David and I were covering this story, and we had to tread very lightly because this is what could get you into trouble back, in the early days of the vaccine and the rollout on YouTube, right? And we were hearing from women. There was a study that was saying that this was happening. It was actually a small scale. I don't think it was a study. It was actually a group of women were coming forward and admitting that this was happening. And then we did the story. And then I received so many emails from husbands and wives, women saying, thank you for doing the story. I thought I was crazy, they were telling us.
Yeah.
That they were saying we were having this issue, right?
And I even had two people that I know, and my masseuse was telling me about some issues she was having, and I was like, I wonder if it's related. And she had not even put that together, that could be what it was. So I know more people that have had adverse reactions like that than had any with the COVID.
Right. So again, I want to talk about what is actually they're saying and how I do think they are sort of continuing to patronize. And I'm going to show you. So the National Institute of Health released this study, and it released it with this quote. Now, the quote I'm about to show you is from Diana Bianchi. She's the director of the NIH Eunice Kennedy Shriver National Institute on Child Development and Human Health. She was not one of the researchers on the study. She's just the director at the NIH who commented on it. Okay. her comment is, these findings provide additional information for counseling women on what to expect after vaccination. Changes following vaccination appear to be small, within the normal range of variation, and temporary. So they're basically saying, no big deal. You know, I mean, again, I should not have to remind everyone about the miracle of contraception. If you've ever tracked your menstruation or tracked your ovulation or checked your temperature in order to either conceive or not conceive, one day is a big deal.
Right. This is why, I mean, the freaking Apple Watch just rolled. They had the big Apple event a few weeks ago, and they rolled out the new Apple Watch that has body temperature tracking, and they spent 5 or 6 minutes in their keynote address talking about women conceiving and how that body temperature and the importance of that and the cycle tracking and all of that is so important. Well, I mean, so Dr. Fauci, I mean, the one thing, so one of the studies and one that released in January had a similar result, 1 day alteration. So Dr. Fauci was asked about this specifically. Not sure when it was exactly, but listen to Dr. Fauci talking about this vaccine protection. Listen.
A number of studies, New York Times just did one about menstruating cycles and how that is affected by vaccines.
Yeah, well, the menstrual thing is something that seems to be quite transient and temporary. That's the point. That's one of the points. We need to study it more.
Okay.
Oh, okay. We need to study it more.
But the media continued to tell us that we will study it, but it's actually really hard to study. For instance, this NPR article says, well, it's hard to study this because, you know, stress can change menstruation and weight gain and basically like the kitchen sink, right? And so we may not actually know. But there is a risk benefit but still get vaccinated because, you know, we will study this eventually. And that's just a really unsatisfactory answer. If I were still in my stage of life where I were wanting to have more children, this would be exponentially more upsetting to me, this data and this effect that I continue to have. At this point, my only comfort is that my daughters have not been vaccinated. And so this won't be something that affects their fertility. And I have so many more questions. Like, will we get to know the lasting effects on fertility? Will anyone ever study fertility rates in vaccinated people? You know, is there some risk benefit calculation here that like we are not being told, right? Because for some women, any change to their fertility is a big risk. And, you know, when you compare it to getting COVID, women were not free to make that choice. Like this ESPN reporter, she could have said, I want to take the chance that I might get COVID because my bigger priority is giving my child a sibling, having another baby, right? And so these women should be made whole from this injustice. And will these things persist with the booster? This is another question, right? Will the media stop actively, you know, discouraging people from asking these questions? So this, like, okay, it's just 1 day. It's okay. It's not a big deal. I really take issue with that, and I reject that.
Well, I mean, just in the fact that these people lied to us, these people lied to all of us, depends, you know, in all across the world, people lied, and
knowingly, based on the documents that we've seen now, they knowingly lied because you can't tell me they did not know what was in those documents.
Yeah, absolutely. They did. And that's the real tragedy here. I mean, we are watching as people saying like Nuremberg 2.0, like, will we ever get answers? Will we ever get answers? There's few people trying to get answers from these people. And it's all for money, and it's all part of the plan. It's all part of the plan to control us. You know, and so people sitting there saying, well, what about the flu shot? What about all these? And you think about, I would never go into a pharmacy and get one of those things. Never. I would never, ever going to do that. And that's my personal opinion. Like that's how I feel about it personally. And you know, we just have to, I think as a society, we need to wake up and we need to stand for ourselves. And when all of these so-called experts were on television and they're all over CNN and they were running advertising and they were buying advertising, trying to force all of this on people, and people were telling them they were having problems and nurses were being kept quiet and told that they couldn't talk about it. Like, this might be one of the greatest I mean, one of the greatest cover-ups, one of the greatest crimes in world history. Will anyone suffer for it? Will anyone be prosecuted for it?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess if these pharmaceutical companies have immunity, they won't be, right?
Well, it just feels
and
right
this is
now,
global.
right, that there's collective outrage fatigue. You can't be outraged about all of the sea life that's harmed from the Nord Stream pipeline and be outraged about, referendums in the Donetsk region and COVID lockdowns and we're outraged about everything. We don't know even what to do about anything. And who benefits from that as politicians? Because we can't prioritize at this point. There's so much that's just messed up.